Okay, folks, welcome back to the Dynasty Fever YouTube channel. Today, going to be going over my rookie wide receiver tiers, continuing sort of this idea of Rookiepedia, distilling all the research I do on rookies down to these presentations for you, and then going over sort of how I have the tiers laid out. So this time we're going to do wide receivers. As you can see here, as with the running backs, it's as of now subject to change. Terms and conditions apply because, of course, the draft is going to shuffle things up, of course, and also some things may happen between now and then. So first, bit of an update on the running back tiers from last time, just in case you watch the video and it was a little while back, a couple weeks ago or whatever, and you're wondering where I'm at. Those are the tiers. I think the biggest difference here is Spears kind of separated out into his own tier, and then the sort of big tier of draft capital will tell us what's going on, sort of thing, is now 5 through 9. At one point it was like 3 through 8, right? So it's, I think, starting to crystallize that Spears is highly regarded and is very likely to go in day 2, even if late, and then the rest kind of is up in the air. Bumped McBride back down into that tier with Hull and McIntosh and Vaughn, but that's the main takeaway from the adjustment to the tiers. And you can see the full, sort of full rankings on goingfor2.com. We only go up to 50 total players overall, so some of the guys I have lower in the position ranks aren't going to show up really on those tiers. So just in case you didn't see the running back video, I'm going to briefly go over this. If you want the longer explanation, go back and watch the running back video. When it comes to ranking rookies, yes, I do watch film, but I'm not a film expert. So I do, listen to and read folks who watch film, who I trust, who have been at it longer. Yes, I do incorporate analytics. I don't necessarily make the plot charts and all that stuff myself, but I dig into analytical profiles that people have out there. Shout out John Bauer from Dynasty Theory, Jay Stein from the Debbie Royale, some of the data sets that are available on campus2canton.com, et cetera, et cetera. So I definitely incorporate all of that. I incorporate expected draft capital into these rankings, how it's going to translate into the NFL and fantasy football. And I just kind of, compile everything and, produce rankings. And that's what you see. And so I kind of think of this as Rookiepedia, right? Like, if you go onto Wikipedia and you read an article, you'll read a Wikipedia article as a good place to start. And then at the bottom, you'll see links to, some of the sources that the writers of the article cited. And that's kind of what I am, right? I'm the Rookiepedia for you, right? Like, I do all this digging and research and, put my own thought process and narrative into it, and then produce rankings for you as dynasty managers. Also, I think it's very important to note that I think of this as a holistic approach, as each prospect is sort of, painting a picture, putting together a mosaic, and context matters for each of, these guys. And I think too many times people say, well, my model says this, or I didn't see this on film, and blah, blah, blah. And, I think you have to sort of incorporate everything into it. And sometimes even, I don't want to say like off the field stuff, but there are contingencies, there are, circumstances that, affect things, whether it's, institutions politics, or, bad offensive coordinator, or, guy wound up in the doghouse or something, whatever it is, right? Like these things go into the production that we see, the analytical profiles we see, right? So I think all these things have to be taken into account when we're ranking these guys. And really, I'm not ranking NFL prospects. I'm ranking fantasy football rookies. And that's what it's translating to for me and for you. Now the rankings also incorporate things like, value and cost and, that sort of thing. And, if are these rankings going to be the order in which I draft them in a rookie draft? Probably not, right? Because say for example, in the running backs, I had A-Chain, all the way down there at, it was running back 11. I may, if I'm forced to, take A-Chain at cost and then try to trade him, that sort of thing, or know that I can get that valuable chip, and because the guy that I actually do want, I don't need to spend that capital on, I can get him later, so something to keep in mind as well. And I encourage folks that when you do make your own rankings, that you take all this into account. All right, so time for you to benefit from the blood, sweat, and tears, and let's get into wide receivers. The 2023 class has been maligned, especially relative to the running back class. And I believe that to be true in the sense that the quality of the running back class is better than the quality of the wide receiver class. But it's deep in the sense that, there's not a whole lot of like studs at the top, but, you're still going 12, 14, 15 wide receivers deep that, you're considering in 3-4 round rookie drafts. And that's pretty good. I think when I think about the 2022 class, obviously it's better, but it's better because of the headliners, right? Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams, Chris Olave, et cetera, Drake London, Treylon Burks, et cetera. But, our wide receiver 10, 12, 14 last year, I don't know that we were as optimistic about those, those guys as I am the wide receiver 10, 12, 14 this year in 2023. So another thing about the class is it's the smalls, right? And it's a class with not a lot of bigs. So it's got some small boys. And, in some ways that's, it's just whatever, it's the class, right? That's how it all shook out. But it also is, I think, indicative of, some of the changes that we're seeing where, small receivers are more successful than they used to be, and successful in different ways, maybe. And that's sort of filtering up in the NFL. We're seeing, some of the smalls in the NFL be more successful. And I think, the data will catch up to that at some point. And so, that's something to keep in mind too. That may take, one of the rarer big guys and shoot them up an NFL team's draft board, right? Because, there's fewer of them. They're more scarce this year. And so just like the running backs, I'm excited about them, but, excited within reason, excited, with proper expectations, I talked about, with the running back video, going, 8, 10, 12 running backs deep and saying, these are solid guys that can be, I think dependable or RB2s or whatever for a few years, something like that, right? Like that's good. That's good that you're grabbing somebody with that kind of, that you have that kind of optimism for in like the 3rd round of rookie drafts before, the NFL draft. And so I think the same can be said for the wide receivers. Yeah, there's like, Jonathan Mingo's my wide receiver 12, and like, I'm optimistic about him, but I'm optimistic about him, being able to contribute as like a wide receiver 3 and a flex on my fantasy football team. I'm not saying that he's going to be, the next, coming, right? So things to keep in mind that a lot of times with rookie fever, and I do it too, I tend to see the positive side, especially before the NFL draft, and make the positive case, the optimistic case for these guys, right? But I think, even when we're making the optimistic case, at least me personally, I'm not making the optimistic case, that they're going to be superstars and elite, right? So when you hear somebody say, "Oh, I love Marvin Mims," right, which I do, right? I'm not saying that Marvin Mims is going to be a top 5 dynasty wide receiver probably at any point in his career, but I'm certainly excited for what I think he can be for his upside, with proper expectations. So what should you do with wide receivers in your rookie drafts this year? I talked a little bit about it with the running backs. Talked a little bit about it on an episode of Dynasty Saturday Night 5 that I did with a mock draft. And the idea here is, I think, as always, you just, you take best player available, best value available, be water, right? You're not really drafting for need in a rookie draft. You can trade for need later. But one thing that stood out, I think, this year, and I talked a little bit about it, as I said, on an episode of DSN5 and in the running back video, is at least for now, the running backs are kind of concentrated up toward the top, and it's going to be hard to, do the pound running back late draft strategy, right? Because there's just not many there that are, really worth taking. And so if you're somebody who says, let me take the wide receivers and then I'll take backup running backs because 0 RB, and I'm not going to take, the 6th or 7th wide receiver on my team, when I could take a running back who might be, an injury away or have a short yardage goal line role or something. I'm all for that, but it may be really hard to do this year because what's going to be around in the 3rd and 4th round, at least now that we're seeing it in rookie draft, the wide receivers left there are much more worthwhile than the running backs. All right, so I didn't really do a good enough job of explaining this in the running back video, so I just wanted to tell you what the color coding and all that is, right? So for each prospect, you'll see how do they glow, right? Like, and that's going to be in the white font. How can they grow, and that's going to be in the red font. Really, it's positives and negatives, pros and cons, right? Strengths and weaknesses. Then in the orange, you're going to see data. So I take a look at all the analytical profiles and just kind of give them a rough letter grade based on the analytics that I see. And then I also give you the relative athletic score. And then in the sort of yellow font, you're going to see comps, player comps. And they're not like one-to-one comps. They're not necessarily floor or ceiling comps. They're not necessarily like, they could be comps for different reasons, size and, play style, right? Role that they might play. So that, there's a lot of different reasons that, you make player comps. But, the ones that come after the semicolon are a little more narrowly tailored to sort of like statistical comps, production comps that they have coming out of school with other prospects that were like them. And that I'm pretty much getting, shout out to JJ Zacharyson. And so I'm not putting all of his in there, like, because like I'm not like, divulging information that like you have to pay for. But I think it's important that, we make a lot of comps as far as like, oh, I see that this kind of play style, but, is that, the production that this person had coming out of college. And I think those narrower comps tend to ground us a little bit more and tether us to the earth with our expectations sometimes. All right. So, and also I would recommend, as necessary, pausing and going through and reading more closely. I'm not going to, be reading every single strength and weakness and all that as we go through these. All right. So, make sure that you do that as needed. So let's kick it off with JSN, right? He's pretty much the guy in tier 1. I kind of have compared him to the Bijan of he's the Bijan of the wide receivers in some sense. I think the gap between Bijan and whoever your RB2 is often bigger than the gap between JSN and whoever your wide receiver 2 is, and I think there's more people who might have JSN not as their wide receiver 1 than people who would not have Bijan as their wide receiver 1, which is probably 0. But the idea for me is that it's a one-person tier. It's like this guy and then everybody else. And, you can see there's a lot of things to like about him. particularly, really good agility and short area quickness. I think it's important to address the idea that he's not just a slot guy, quote unquote. I think size wise, he is, on the bigger side of guys that are slot receivers. I think he can be used on deeper targets better than a lot of guys who are just slot receivers. And I think he has more potential for outside usage and partly because of that size, than a lot of guys who are just slot guys. I think it is worth noting that people do ding him for lapses in route running, or that they'd like to see his play strength. I think also we haven't seen him make many contested catch, and in a way that's like, you don't want your wide receivers to have a whole lot of their targets be contested, because that kind of means they're not getting open as much as you want, right? But we just haven't seen many reps where he's had to make a contested catch, so we don't have like a full picture of his ability to do that. I think people are wary of the percentage of his reps that will be in the slot in the NFL because of what happened in college. I think he was about 83 or 85% in the slot, and that's like the highest of like any wide receiver that would be drafted in the top 15 in like, I think in 10 or 12 years or something like that. So, that's something to keep in mind as well. And he really only had the 1 year of production. It was very good. I think for him, it was like, okay, I got a little bit of a hammy in 2022. I might as well shut it down. Everybody knows I'm an elite prospect. Just let me get ready for the NFL. And I don't think he was really in a rush to get back. And so, but some people might be worried that he didn't put enough total production on record, and enough reps on tape. As you can see there's a wide range of comps for him as far as like how he can be used and what he'll turn into. With Juju and Garrett Wilson being the statistical comps, I think a kind of a bigger Amon-Ra with a little bit more versatility as far as like outside usage and deeper targets, I think is a good comp that I like. And so he's easily my wide receiver one. Drafting him with confidence at the 105 as of now. I don't see anything really changing based on what happens in the draft, unless there's something unexpected that he drops way below guys like Addison, QJ, and that's all right. So tier 2, like the running back tiers, some of the running back tiers, there's going to be some tiers that have like an A and B. There's going to be like a soft tier break in like, so there's like a tier within a tier. And for me, Jordan Addison is that tier within a tier. He has a super safe floor, I think. And I think that kind of separates him from a lot of what's beneath him, right? It's kind of like JSN and everybody else, right? JSN, I think, has, the most dynamism and the, best floor ceiling combo. Then I think it's like, JSN and Addison and everybody else, because I think, that's when after Addison, you start to get a lot of questions about floor and or ceiling with these guys. And so I think that's where there's sort of a soft tier break for me. He definitely disappointed at the combine. His 40 time was in the 69th percentile. His speed score is in the 18th percentile. His burst score in the 37th percentile, right? But he also has some good numbers going for him, like a 29.9% dominator rating, 15.4% yards per reception, 23.7% target share, a breakout age of 18.6, best EPA per play of 1.56, best receiving yards per team pass attempt of 2.66, right? There's a lot to like. He's a good route runner with good hands. He probably will have a high percentage of snaps in the slot in the NFL, so that can limit his usage. And therefore, like his ceiling. I'm going to get a little more into it when I get into it with Downs, but I'm not too worried about that. did his combine disappoint? And we're a little more a little less enthusiastic about him, sure. But I think I feel much safer taking him at, say, I don't know, 107, 108, 9 than I would QJ, or a guy that's going way too high, I think, Jalen Hyatt or Zay Flowers. That's right. So I mentioned Downs. Downs size does concern me, right? He came in both shorter and lighter than we wanted. He has great hands, is a really impact player. He's a very good athlete, despite the RASP being only 7.79. What is going to be the impact of him being limited to the slot? I think more so than Addison, and probably more so than Flowers, he has a slot only, like, pretty much 100% slot profile. So I think he's a good guy to talk about this concept of, slot guys in fantasy football. We like slot guys. Slot guys are good for PPR. They get a lot of targets, right? I think, not a lot of their targets are deep, although I think Downs can win deep well enough. And he does play bigger than his size. And I think people also say, well, they get taken off the field with 2 wide receiver sets. Okay, well, let's play this through, right? How many teams are running 11 personnel and therefore three wide receiver sets, and then even 4 wide receiver sets beyond 11 personnel, at a higher rate than they used to, right? I mean, what team really runs, 2 wide receiver only sets at like really high percentages in the NFL, like the Ravens used to, right? So that's not too much of a concern for me. It's also not too much of a concern because what percentage of a team's passing plays and quarterback dropbacks come from 2 wide receiver only sets, right? So really the point that I'm making here is, how many of the passing snaps is he on the field for and running routes for, i.e. route percentage matters a lot more to me than snap percentage, so as long as he's running a route on a really good number of his quarterbacks dropbacks, I kind of don't care that he's off the field in 2 wide receiver sets. May limit him in the red zone and things like that, sure. But I think it's important to put into context when people say, oh, it's just slot guy. That's not very meaningful, especially these days in the NFL. And Flowers is similar to him as far as height and like the role that they'll play. People like Flowers as a little bit more physical and yacky than Downs. He's 10 pounds heavier. He's also a little older, a little more of that low ADOT profile where it's all yak. I don't want to say that I get, Rondell Moore vibes from him. But, there are some Rondell Moore vibes that I get from him. But at the same time, I think, when you're such a big piece of the Boston College offense, and you did show ways that you can win that are not just that way. I think people are drafting him with confidence. Really, QJ in the middle there is the enigma. He's one of these out at cost guys for me. I don't want him at 110. I don't want him at 111. I think that's overpaying for a whole lot of question marks. We see the body catching. We see, I think, effort and mental lapses, and getting outbodied by corners that shouldn't be outbodying him. And I just, is he going to be the player who hires a wide receivers coach, independent, and works with them? And is he going to put in the hours at the jug machine? He could be, but there's enough question marks there where I'm kind of out at cost. Huge ceiling though, great size and athleticism combo. So, I'll probably have a couple shares that I plan on keeping, not, to diversify and that sort of thing, but not a guy that I have a whole lot of confidence in, particularly where he's being taken in rookie mocks at the moment. So This tier is Marvin and the Maybes, another soft tier break, and then some guys who I think maybe get day 1-2 capital. I think Hyatt's obviously looking like he's going to get day 2 and maybe even day 1 capital. I'll talk about why I have him so low. But I think these guys have like the best chance of being solid contributors. And it's going to depend really, I think, on factors like draft capital, landing spot, opportunity, can they take the next step and develop, in the case of a guy like Rashee Rice. So, but I think after 10, then it's, for me, I think the Wild West, and as far as rankings go, and I really couldn't argue it with almost any order. And I think it's much less certain about, whether or not these guys are going to be drafted in spots we like and can contribute in places. So, I said before that I love Marvin Mims. He's definitely a my guy. I think all these guys have a very good chance, or a good to very good chance, of going rounds 1 to 3. But most, with the exception of Hyatt, are kind of still values in rookie draft mocks at the moment. So, Mims is a post-combine riser. I think for me, I've been calling him the discount Josh Downs. I think he's about 75-80% of the player Josh Downs is, and you can get him much cheaper. There was a point when I wrote an article about him where he was going in the early 3rd, and now you've seen him creep up sometimes in mocks all the way up to like the early 2nd. So the idea of him being a value is less certain, and I think what happens with some of those running backs in the 2nd round will be telling for Mims. Besides obviously what happens to him, but he's a guy I really love, especially relative to cost and that he's kind of being slept on. Another riser that is kind of being slept on is Cedric Tillman, and for me, he's an example of that context matters guy. People will point to the age and the late breakout and that sort of thing, and I think there's factors we need to consider. He redshirted his freshman year. He had a pretty crowded wide receiver room, a pretty pretty bad offense, and subpar quarterback play. And when Josh Heupel, the coach, came in, and Hendon Hooker, the quarterback, came in, he had his breakout year in 2021 because it was a competent offense. He's also a big in a class of smalls. So far in the first 6 receivers really that we looked at, the one true big was Quentin Johnson. And here's Tillman at 7, the next big, right? So, that's something to keep in mind. I think, he can be expected to, be a good boundary presence. He positions his body well. And I think, he's someone who, again, is also a riser and also creeping up rookie mock drafts. I've seen him go as early as the early 2nd, like Mims, but I'm seeing him also, go in the late 2nd and early 3rd. So he could very well end up being a value, as could Rashee Rice and Hutchinson, who I kind of see together in a way, even though they're different players, in that they're older, but I think they will be safe-ish bets for NFL teams. I think they both answered athleticism questions at the combine. I think Rice a little bit more than Hutchinson, obviously. There's a bit more ceiling there with Rice, and a bit more floor with Hutch. But I've been a huge Hutchinson guy since day 1. He's my guy. I'm definitely above consensus on him. He's still going like mid-3rd and even 4th round in some of these rookie mocks, and I'm okay taking him like just in a vacuum, and as far as like how I value him really as a 2nd rounder. I won't have to take him in the 2nd round much, I don't think, but that could change with what happens in the draft. If the NFL looks around and says, okay, he's a big in a class of smalls, and he's a reliable, veteran who produced and knows how to play the game and is well-rounded, he can run good enough routes. He has good enough hands and footwork. He has good enough transitioning upfield and getting some yak, and we can plug him in and feel really safe about him being a contributor, then he may rise up NFL draft boards. There was a point, I think, in NFL mock draft database shortly after the combine, where he was already, regarded as a, projected as a third rounder, as day 2 capital. I think he might have dipped back down since then. But I think you could really scoop him up as a value, because as I said, right now the running backs are really clustered up in that second round. And so, some of these wide receivers are falling, and Hutchinson's one of them. And he's a guy I really, really like. Hyatt is the Devon A chain of wide receivers. I'm out at cost. I just don't see it. In most cases, I probably won't have any of him. Maybe a couple shares to trade, maybe a diversification slash what if I'm wrong share or two. But I just think he has a very limited path to his payoff. And that payoff is meaningful because it's being tied to the high cost that you'll be expending for him in rookie mocks. I mean, I'm seeing him go 110, 111, 201, 202, right? So, I want return if I'm spending that, and I don't see the path there for Hyatt. He's, to me, a very narrow, one-dimensional player. I think, when he faces NFL defensive coordinators and physical corners, I just don't think it's going to be the type of success that he saw in college. He also kind of really only produced when Tillman was out for the most part. So to me, he's got Henry Ruggs and written all over him, and I don't know, Will Fuller ceiling maybe, right? And I don't know that I want Will Fuller ceiling in the 111 that I'm taking, but some people would say, well, if he turns into Will Fuller 111, yeah, that's kind of a success, right? Next is there's some there, but how much, right? And as I said, after the first 10 for me, people have the order all over the place. Just depends on who you like, what kind of profile you're willing to take a bet on, where you think these guys are going in the NFL draft, etc. And so some of these guys may get day 2 capital. I think Mingo, for example, has been mocked even in the first round by the 33rd team. They did a mock that had him at number 26 to the Giants, right? So, day 2 draft capital will make these guys risers. Otherwise, you're still going to see them in the 3rd or 4th round of rookie drafts, which is where they're going now. Absent, a real slide by one of the running backs that we don't expect to slide way down. Jaden Reed, I think, is kind of in that soft tier break above the rest of these guys. A guy that I'm willing to say, probably has a better chance that I might bet on more. He's kind of a tweener when it comes to size, and there was a dip in production, and that dip in production was partly because the offense was much less effective, especially with Ken Walker gone, but also he had stiff competition from a freshman, and that's not something that you love to see, but there are a lot of people who love him as a sleeper. JJ Zacharyson loves him as a sleeper, has kind of pointed him out as a guy to definitely watch out for. You want him to have a bit better size, particularly not as thin a frame if he's going to be going up against physical corners. But this guy has been a playmaker really throughout his college career, and I think probably has the most upside of this group. Mingo, on the other hand, is the guy. He's just a favorite of mine. He's my guy. He's been a riser for me mostly after the combine. I think he's kind of a safe-ish bet for NFL teams and for you, as far as guys that are going to be at this spot in the rankings, right? Once you're into past the top 10 in wide receiver rankings, sometimes you're taking swings for upside. Sometimes you're saying, does this guy look like a safe bet to produce? And I think Mingo can be. I think he's rising in NFL mocks, as I said. I think he's rising in the fantasy community. I also think that when we look at the pluses and minuses for wide receivers after, the top 10 or so. He's maybe got the lowest ceiling, but I think he's kind of got a high floor. And I think he's got, like, I think the least question marks. He's not anything, you know, uh super outstanding or elite, right? But you can see him being a solid contributor in the NFL, and plugging him in as a wide receiver 3 or flex option in your fantasy roster, and being okay with that. And that's good, for someone who's going in the mid third round, sometimes at the highest in the mid third round when it comes to where he's going in these rookie mock drafts. Another guy I want to point out is Michael Wilson. But before we do, another safe guy with unlimited ceiling is Parker Washington. He only did the bench press at the combine, which is, partly why there's no RAS there. Again, he's kind of got some mixed reviews. There's also the question of the bad quarterback play. So we'll see where he ends up. I think he's a low ceiling guy, but I think he's going to surprise some people with his floor. Michael Wilson is really intriguing. He's sort of a quasi my guy. He's been a riser since the Senior Bowl and the Combine. This is more of an upside ranking of putting him here at 14. I think he's the least likely in this bunch to go day 2, but this is sort of I like the upside relative to the cost when it comes to Wilson. I think he has seen some injuries, some low production. I think he was, underutilized in a bad Stanford offense. So that's going to contribute to the production profile and the analytics. But I think he's got a shot to surprise some people, and he's available in the 4th, 5th round right now of your rookie drafts. Okay. Tier 5A and 5B, talk darty to me. So these guys at the moment are pretty much dart throws. Tyler Scott's getting a lot of love in the NFL mocks. The word is on the street is the NFL likes him. So I've even seen him mocked in round 2 of the NFL draft. I'm not super impressed with him, but I think that certainly contributes to my willingness to rank him this high. I think Puka probably has a little bit of boom bust in him as a prospect overall, and as like a week-to-week fantasy player. But I think he's kind of the most intriguing and interesting of this bunch. Andre Eusebius from Princeton, he's sort of being billed as 2023's Christian Watson. I think that's a little much. He's probably got the most upside relative to the ranking of guys in this tier, but he may have to, essentially take a redshirt first year and develop, because he's coming from Princeton, from the FCS. But a lot of good athleticism there, and he has shown the ability to use his body well and have reliable hands. So I don't think he's going to be picked at around, I don't know, what was Christian Watson, like 35, right, or in the 40s maybe. I don't think he's going to get that type of draft capital, so I don't think the comp is really all that good. But certainly a guy, an upside swing worth taking. Kayshon Boutte, I mean, he's just a big mystery right now, so I just kind of buried him in the rankings. He did not do himself any favors at the combine. There's of course the off-field concerns. There's the mental lapses, on-field concerns. You could see the effort wasn't there. There's concerns that the ankle that he had is actually an Achilles. What's your risk tolerance? If you have a higher risk tolerance than some other folks, you're taking Boutte, in the early 3rd in some of these mocks. Otherwise, if you're someone like me, it's like, he's kind of a do not draft, right? The NFL is going to tell us a lot. If he ends up in like the 5th round in the NFL, I don't really see much of a reason to have him on our radars, unless, it's like, I don't know, 4th round in a rookie draft, and you take that upside swing. If an NFL team is willing to bet on him and take him like round 3 and say, you know what, and we think with the landing spot, there's a path to, his athleticism and stuff, panning out, we'll see. But for me, he's pretty much, don't even bother at this point. A.T. Perry and Bryce Ford Wheaton are both sort of size speed guys that have flaws in their game as receivers. Perry has the thinner frame of the two, but yeah, I think is the more highly regarded and I think more likely to be a contributor than Ford Wheaton. But certainly guys to watch because again, they're big in a class of smalls. The NFL loves speed, so something to keep an eye on. Deeper sleepers for now. Not going to really go too much into these guys. Tank Dell was a Senior Bowl riser, and then I don't know. You know, people thought he had day 2 capital coming out of the Senior Bowl, and that's why he didn't even bother with the rest of it. But he's been falling recently, I think, in people's eyes, and certainly in the mock drafts that I'm in. I'm averaging like a mock a day, mock a night, and I'm not seeing Dell really well regarded anymore. You know, coming off the Senior Bowl buzz, he was, you know, easily a mid, sometimes early third in some mocks, and now he's going undrafted a lot of times in 4-rounders. So, you know, there's a very low hit rate for guys his size and his BMI. He's a very good separator and route runner. He's got speed. You know, the yak could translate in the NFL. You know, but he also could not break enough tackles to have the yak. And I don't know, you know, you know, is he a better football player than, you know, Tutu Atwell was? Yeah. But you know, I don't know. I just don't see a credible path to success there with Tank Dell. Obviously, draft capital landing spot will tell us some stuff, but he's kind of a guy that I don't want to say he's on my do not draft list, but he's not really a risk that I like taking. I think the NFL may look at Raheem Jarrett and say, okay, he had, you know, Talia Tagovailoa as, you know, to his brother as a quarterback in college, and he was not good. The Maryland offense was not good. And so they may say, okay, he's got this 5-star pedigree and he's got this athleticism. So, you know, we'll take a chance on him. And I think that sort of scenario, which is not uncommon in the NFL draft, I think has him still in this tier, this like soft tier break for me at 22. But you know, again, not a guy who's really too much on folks' radars at the moment and is going undrafted in 4 and sometimes even 5-round rookie mocks. And you know, the rest of the guys, you know, there are long shots, there's flaws there. Higgins is intriguing. He may actually turn into a tight end. He practiced at the Senior Bowl, and they said, go practice with the tight ends. And then he put on 10 more pounds prior to the NFL Combine. So I don't know. The NFL may say, let's try to turn this guy into a tight end. And you know, he may turn out you know, to be I don't know, maybe a Darren Waller story. You know, Dontavian Wicks, some people say, well, you know, there was the OC change. And so, you know, the dip came from bad coaching and bad offense. You know, I just think at this point in the rankings, you know, these are guys that are absent some unexpected draft capital or landing spot. You know, you're looking at 4th and even 5th round picks in your rookie drafts, guys that you know, might be worth taking a swing on. You know, Trey Palmer is a speedster, and you know, I think people like him, but again, you know, there's a lot of limitations there. And so let's round this out with some of the rest, right? There's wide receivers, so there's 14,000 of them that have declared for the NFL draft, and you know, what you're looking at is just some of, like, you know, the also rans. Some guys that I have ranked, some guys I don't have ranked. You know, of these that are on the screen, who should you watch out for? You know, Hazelwood had a good pedigree and stuff, and you know, went to, you know, 2 Power 5 schools, but I don't know, just never put it together. He you know, he's sort of an enigma, but also I think, you know, really sunk himself with his combine performance. Grant DuBose is getting some buzz. You know, as someone with, you know, size in the class of smalls, he's from Charlotte, you know, the 49ers. And I think, you know, I think he's a name that you could see sneak into, I don't know, around 4 or 5 and maybe get on people's radars. Um, let's see, Mitchell Tinsley, Penn State, some folks like him. You know, obviously easy to say, okay, well, you try catching passes from Sean Clifford. And then, you know, in sort of in the deep cuts, there's, you know, a few names. Matt Wallman kind of highlighted Keelan Harris from Oklahoma Baptist as a name to watch as well. So yeah, you know, probably, you know, you're seeing these guys in round 6, 7 UDFAs in the NFL, but you never know. But if you were wondering, oh, well, you know, Dante Demas is big. Where do you have him? Or I've heard, you know, Jalen Wayne, people like him. Where do you have him? You know, I have him on a slide where, you know, I'm not even really putting notes on it, right? So, all right. And Demario Douglas, Darius Davis, you know, again, you know, these are names that have been out there, you know, with speed or impressive combines or whatever. And you know, again, I just don't think they're really worth having on your radar. Okay. So that pretty much does it for the names and the wide receiver tiers. You know, make sure that you follow the show at Dynasty Fever Pod. You can follow me on Twitter at @FFJunkie_. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel and click a little thumbs up on the video. That'd be great. You know, leave some polite feedback in the comments, and you can catch Dynasty Fever audio podcast episodes every Thursday. This week coming up, we're going to have Brendan Lejeune. We're going to be talking some of his takes on rookies. He has some interesting takes that I think are also good this time of year because they're realistic and will tether us to the earth when it comes to sometimes getting a little too optimistic about these rookies. So yeah, thanks for watching, and hope this was helpful for you, and we'll see you around.